Hello, welcome to the New Stack Makers, a podcast where we talk about at-scale application development, deployment, and management. It may all seem like free love and hugs, but open source contributions have considerable benefit. The return is in how open source contributions are valued. That's how Matt Broberg of Sensu describes the way open source is valued for an open source software company. There's a ratio really that can be used. It derives from the amount of people who find value in the open source project in comparison to the revenues and overall value the open source company receives from community interaction. That's what Broberg said in this episode of the New Stack Makers, which we recently recorded at the Open Source Leadership Summit in Sonoma, California. Broberg has a humanistic and business perspective that defines his views about the way community management provides value back to the business and the individuals who are consuming open source. Overall contributions and open source users who find value in the platform does not always mean these individuals will use the commercial version that Sensu offers. But if a percentage of those open source users are using the Sensu product, then that's a healthy sign. It's why the interactions do matter when Broberg is meeting with people in the community. It may not be all about the hugs, but let Matt tell you sometime about the values of those interactions purely on a human and business level. The New Stack will be live at the Cloud Foundry Summit, ChefConf, and KubeCon Plus Cloud Native Con this spring. We'll be podcasting, hosting pancake breakfast, and spending a lot of time talking with people. Thanks to all our sponsors who make our work possible here at the New Stack. So Matt, we just got cut off, and so what we're talking a lot about, build versus buy, open source communities. I guess I'm wondering, is there some kind of scattered, or is there kind of some kind of, we always talk about giving back, right? But are there metrics for that? Are there any way? I mean, it just seems like such an abstract thing to talk about. It almost kind of is oh, those open source guys are always talking about contributing back, and I'm not sure what they're talking about. It's sounds almost like a hippie kind of thing.
Yeah, like free love and hugs.
Yeah.
And I definitely joke that I'm basically my value to companies and to the individuals is providing hugs as a service.
Well,
right?
that's what Chef does.
Yeah, exactly.
They have
exactly.
that they have a hug-o-meter?
I don't, but I want to.
In their main office.
I want to use that now.
It's when everyone gives a hug, the hug-o-meter lights up.
Will pop up.
Yeah, it's oh, there's another hug. No, they don't really have that, but they actually said that to me. The community manager told me that they have a hug-o-meter, and he was explaining the whole hug-o-meter thing. I'm like, oh, that's ingenious. How do you capture the data? He's like, we don't have a hug-o-meter.
We do have a gullible meter up over here, though, if you look real closely. No, but you bring up a great point of, and that's a two-part of how does open source kind of live by the value that it's trying to provide others, but also how do you measure it? So on the metric side, to start there, there are some raw numbers you can start gathering that will give you some insights into your effectiveness, and it could be number of contributors and then number of users of the open source technology. And if you see a large number of open source users that are deriving value from your project, and you're also being a successful business alongside that, you're clearly showing value to a huge portion of people while also being able to sustain the company. So I feel like there's a ratio between how many people succeed on their own versus before I have some sort of business value, and don't see those as competitive. It's not you need to convert everyone from open source to closed source. It's that people will go down their own paths, and if you do it right, there will be enough people of each.
Right.
So that's a huge one for me as a business person. But as an individual, as a community manager, as a practice, I really think about the individual anecdotes of how many people have I helped be better at their work, be better at their life even, be supportive of them through times of change. And that tends to come in through a pattern of frequent contributors and being engaged with them, getting to know them as people, spending time with them. I've helped numerous people present for the first time, go from engineer to public speaker, produce blog posts for the first time. I've helped a lot of people find their next job because they were unhappy, even if it meant not working on my project anymore. I try to add value to individuals as much as possible, and that's something.
Is that a value of yours?
Absolutely, that we need to play the longer game. All companies will change. All of us will change companies in the long run, and it's really a question of are you building a better ecosystem ecosystem of people around you, and are you are you able to stand by your values throughout doing so?
How do you think about that in a culture that puts such a value on velocity and breaking things and building a culture around that?
Yeah, I just don't think they're mutually exclusive at all, right? Like we will break things, but you break things in a semantically useful way. That's why
But how
it's
can you have that kind of a culture and make it sustainable if it's always looking at this breakneck speed?
you know what? You can't, I guess, to some degree, right? You have to slow down, like
Yeah,
slow down and pay attention to people, not just
right,
the numbers that are flying past your
right.
face. And it feels cheesy, but in practice, there will always be time for real human connection if you prioritize it over breakneck speed and other things. So I personally, to get practical, I carve out half an hour every morning to think about somebody other than me that I could help in my community, and make sure to reach out and say like, hey, I hope you're well. I know you were going through something, or hey, I saw this pull request wasn't getting enough attention. I've like brought it up to some people. Like
So you think
provide
about it.
value with
You think
people.
about it quite semantically. There's a semantic context for thinking about how you give back, right, or how you help someone, right. It
Yeah.
could be personally. It could be like even like giving a lift up on a difficult technical problem they're trying to
Yeah,
solve.
absolutely, absolutely. When you're thinking about the value you can provide somebody from their perspective as opposed to your own, like I always put that in the win category of being like, and that's ultimately what you have to do with all business, right? Like think about what your customer not wants, not what you want to provide them.
Right.
And if those two things align very well, you are successful. And if they don't, then you don't. The best community managers I speak to are always thinking from their external, users' point of view, their community's point of view. So there's room for that in our industry, and the best communities are often led by people that focus on that first, and then figure out how to connect that into a business value as well. They're not mutually exclusive; they're complementary.
Which leads, I mean, to question. I mean, which leads kind of again back to this build versus buy conversation for me
Yeah.
in a kind of roundabout way, but because the difference between buying a platform and getting a support contract for it versus participating in an open source community and sharing and learning and pulling, the core technology from that community to build, something that you need or you're selling or whatever, it becomes an interesting kind of a balance, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think there's a way of thinking of it from like the customer point of view of like there are customers that will be only open source, and there will be customers that are enterprise. But if you focus on the individual point of view, like we were just hitting on, I'd say like close to 80% of our enterprise customers at Sensu, to give a number, are open source participants in some way. They're
Yeah.
opening issues or they're helping people on our forums. So there is a immediate value in connecting to this larger group, and when I do my job really well, I add value to their lives as well.
But what happens when you have open source organizations where perhaps the maintainers have been there since the start,
Mm,
and there may be a handful of them,
yeah.
and they bring in new maintainers based upon their experience or whatever. But then how do you then manage that, with new people who are coming into the community
Yeah.
who won't be able to have a voice for a while, and because they just need to get into the community and become part of it, but also there's also kind of all these dynamics that come inside projects that are self-governed, is like, how does that maintainer actually choose who, choose kind of the direction of the technology itself,
Yeah.
and who they're going to give credit to
Sure.
for that pull request, right?
Sure.
You know?
Yeah. So there are a few things there, right? Like all projects need leadership in some form. At the beginning of any project, that leadership is implicit, and as you're growing, you need to make it more explicit and make it more clear on how you go from a small oligarchy of original founders only to maybe somebody that is, chopping wood and carrying water in
Right.
the Sarah Novotny at Google and Kubernetes community kind of way. And I think if you're looking for a case study in how you go from like small implicit to large explicit, I think Kubernetes is a perfect proof point of that does work with time, but it doesn't happen by accident. It happens with intention by hiring really smart people to manage something like that. So there's never a single answer of it. Like, there are a lot of little checkpoints along the way. And if you want to see how it's been done well, Kubernetes is a great example. But how are you going to do it in your community? Like, you got to take it one of those challenges at a time. And we could talk for a good 12 hours on that.
Yeah, it gets into questions like how do you provide voice for marginalized communities, right?
Oh,
Who may be
absolutely.
marginalized in society, but they actually have a place. They would be, due to their kind of marginalization in society, that does carry over kind of almost in their entire lives. Right?
Yeah. The sort of implicit biases that are sustained in your community if you don't do something that removes yourself from that implicit bias.
Right.
Yeah, it's not an easy one. There are brilliant people that are far more deep on this, talking about inclusive communities. I now more than ever really value code of conducts. And instead of thinking of those as a document you put far to the side, it actually should be the primary page of your community, that all roads lead through your code of conduct, so that more people soak up that information.
I think that's going to be the title here. All roads, what is it? All roads what?
Lead to the code of conduct.
All roads lead to the code of conduct.
I would love for that to be the case, and that's something I'm currently strategizing how to do more effectively in my own community.
Well, we'll have to follow up.
Yeah, please do.
Thanks so much for taking some time,
Always,
Matt.
Alex. Yeah,
I'm so glad you're in Portland too, and and we'll get together more and hang out, and and drink coffee and talk about. And maybe next time we'll talk about reflexology or something.
Yeah, I'm really into a good reflexologist.
Yeah.
Like, you're really gonna get the cramps out of your calf.
I'm disappointed Jonas couldn't talk with us today, but we'll have to get his views on reflexology, because I know you guys have talked a lot about that.
There's a really strong Venn diagram overlap of community managers and people that appreciate getting their calves rubbed.
Hey man, it's like, the calves are connected to the hip bone, right?
Yep. Yeah. Somewhere.
Yeah.
I'm no doctor, but that sounds right.
All right. Thanks.
All right,
Bye bye.
Thank you all for listening to us.
Listen to more episodes of the New Stack Makers at thenewstack.io/podcast. Please rate and review us on iTunes, like us on YouTube, and follow us on SoundCloud. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.